Alrighty. Hello. Good morning, good afternoon, or maybe even good evening, depending on where you are tuning in from. We'll get started in just about a minute or so. We'll leave just a little bit of time for folks to continue trickling in here, but we'll plan to get started, I think, somewhere between the 2 and 3 minute mark here. Yeah. All right. Well, it looks like we're at a pretty stable number of attendees here. So let's go ahead and get started. So welcome all to our February webinar here. Today we're going to be unveiling the new Stellic Registration Hub, where you all as partners who are using Stellic for registration are going to be able to leverage some new exciting self-service features that we have for the configuration kind of prep work that goes into setting up your registration cycle here in Stellic without actually needing the additional kind of back and forth and support that currently is necessary for getting your registration set up. This new functionality is going to streamline the registration process and also bring transparency and clarity to our registration partners. So we're looking forward to showing this new functionality to you today and also are excited to hear some of your initial feedback as well. Today's content is going to be mostly geared towards our institutional registrars and project managers who oversee registration configuration and prep. But if that's not you, we're still excited and happy to have you joining us here today. Couple of housekeeping items to go through before we fully jump into today's session. Just to let you all know, this webinar is being recorded and we will share the recording of today's session as soon as that's available. We'll be posting that to our knowledge base online there. So if you have any colleagues that weren't able to attend today or might benefit from seeing the content that we're going to go through here today, please feel free to check out that recording afterwards. Other main thing that I want to call out is as we are going through today's session, if you do have any questions that come to mind, please feel free to send those our way via the Q&A feature in Zoom here. Sending those through the Q&A feature just helps us make sure that we are not accidentally overlooking any questions as they come in. So we will have dedicated time at the end of today's session to go through any questions that get submitted. In addition to the Q&A, we also will be looking for a little bit of feedback towards the end of today's session. So we ask for that feedback. Please send those comments through the Zoom chat here. Last but not least, we are going to be announcing next month's webinar topic as well at the end of today's session. So make sure you stick around for the end of our session to find out what we're going to be talking about next. Awesome. Well, with that said, let me do a quick kind of overview of what we have for today's session. I'm actually going to start with a quick poll here to get a sense of who's in our audience today. Then I'll be introducing myself and Gordon. We'll talk through some of the motivation around these new registration features, provide a demo of that as well, and then also have time for Q&A at the end, like I mentioned earlier. So we'll give folks a minute or two here to respond to the poll that we've set up, and then I'll go ahead and jump over to some introductions here. All right, awesome. Well, it looks like our poll is closed, and it looks like we've actually got a good mix of folks attending today, which is awesome. I see it looks like we've got a pretty even spread across all the different persona types that we have in that poll there. So excited. This should be relevant, I think, to a lot of you different folks out there. So awesome. Alrighty. Well, let's jump over to introductions then, now that we've gone through kind of our agenda here. So, hello, for those of you who I have not met, I'm Sam Starks, one of our partner success managers here at Stellic. I'm also joined by my colleague Gordon, who I'll let introduce himself here.
Hello, everyone. For those of you who have not met me, I am the product manager for the plan team. We oversee pathways, planner, scheduler, and registration. So I am kind of here in my capacity as the person more or less in charge of registration at Stellic. Good to see everyone.
Awesome. Thanks, Gordon. And I think with introductions now out of the way, I'm going to kind of more formally hand things over to Gordon to lead us through the bulk of today's content here.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Sam. I think Sam did a great job introducing kind of the concept of the registration hub. But I will do kind of a quick little intro into the nature of the project before we start to kind of walk through and demo it for everybody. So for those of you who have done a registration cycle with Stellic, you know that right now there is a lot, or even people who've done implementation know that the current version of this requires a lot of back and forth between yourselves, your partner success team, and then my team on the engineering side to kind of initially get things set up to launch new registration cycles and then to monitor how those cycles are going. And in general, there's any delay, especially during registration, is 1 minute too many. And so we wanted to really focus on how do we really streamline that and give you all the tools that you need to kind of directly set things up yourselves and to be able to monitor and troubleshoot things as quickly as possible. I think in general, also just handing over more direct controls to partners. In my mind is going to be a win. And so you'll see that that starts to change more and more across various parts of Stellic. But kind of all of these kind of goals come together to kind of form the registration hub. Um, so let's check it out. First up, access. So we are going to introduce two new permissions that you can kind of apply at the institution setting. It'll be this view registration configuration and edit registration configuration. So you'll be able to assign these to different members within your institution. View will allow you to, one, see the registration hub in your quick links, as well as be able to see various elements within the hub versus edit will actually allow you to go in there and make changes. Kind of here is an example of one of those screens. So I might be able to see these particular pieces here in my SIS configuration, but unless I have the edit permission, I won't necessarily see this option kind of in the top right corner. So we wanted to make sure, because there are kind of some sensitive pieces here, that only people that you strictly want to have access to be able to edit can, while there are other pieces that it might be useful to kind of like double check certain things, and other people may want to be able to have kind of view access there. So you're going to need to work with your kind of partner success team to figure out who you want to have various levels of access as we start to kind of roll this out and begin testing. So with that being said, let's kind of check it out. So I already have my permissions set up here, so I can click straight into the registration hub, and I'm going to kind of walk through kind of three core use cases. So one, this is all about setting up an initial kind of registration configuration where I can come in here and I can essentially define things like student information system, institution code, platform URL. If any of my credentials have changed, I can update those here. But for kind of our PeopleSoft institutions and soon kind of all of our core student information systems that we support, all you will need to do is kind of add this information here. And once you've installed kind of our package, whitelisted our URLs, you will more or less have registration ready to go. So this becomes significantly more self-service. There's no waiting for Stellic to set up your registration interface. I kind of go through, put in my configuration details, and I am good to go. So that is really for mostly focused on initial setup and also making sure that if my credentials do change, that I have a chance to go in here and change those.
Hey,
Uh,
Gordon,
yeah.
real quick before you continue, would it be possible for you to zoom in just a little bit? I think it's a little hard for folks to see with the wider screen view.
100%. I get it. This is the world's widest monitor. Um,
Thank you.
no problem. As we kind of move into number two, I have kind of my connectivity section here. This is all about ensuring and testing how well I have been able to establish a connection between the SIS and Stellic. So once I have defined basically what student identifier I want to use, I can actually now go in and leverage the kind of API health check. So what this is all about is essentially saying, great, I'm going to kind of like run a quick smoke test and determine whether or not Stellic is correctly communicating with my SIS. And we will be able to surface a bunch of different types of errors as you are getting set up to identify basically where in the process there might still be an issue here. So when I click run, you can see here that I have, it says that this has failed and it gives me kind of a specific reason here where it looks like it's not able to find essentially this particular student in the system. So if I come in here and I actually put in a student that is in the system and I run this again, you can see now that it's kind of gone to a new type of error. And I will be able to continue to try out and make sure that there are various different pieces here. But I did want to kind of show off that you will be able to see based on all of kind of these different errors that might surface and the various messages that might come up that we will have much more insight into exactly what might be going wrong. And this will help us really streamline and give you immediate feedback as you're getting things set up. Great, did we finish and set up the package correctly? Have we actually finished setting up or enabling all the have we whitelisted all the correct IPs? Did we actually, for like banner or colleague schools, did we provision the correct APIs for Stellic to leverage? We'll be able to get more and more errors here. Oh, is actually there an issue with the kind of SIS side of things versus on the Stellic side of things? And so we'll have a bunch of kind of like various error states that you will be able to check and run. And this is also something that you can kind of continuously do over time to make sure that, great, yep, the connection is still there. Because if you've run kind of cycles here and you're trying to debug things, understanding kind of where in the flow the error comes from is really, really important. So understanding that, yes, the kind of like connection between the SIS and Stellic is there. We can cross that off on the list and we can move on to the next piece here. You can see here that right now we basically just have the single schedule API. We are going to add over time kind of all of the core APIs that Stellic calls. So that way you can also see, oh, all of the calls are working except for drop. And you can then isolate specific APIs that might not be provisioned or that might be kind of like set up incorrectly. So that is really kind of more for great. We've now kind of set up the initial configuration, and now we're testing whether or not that configuration is perfectly set up. Do we have connectivity between those? So these first two things are really focused on kind of mostly that initial setup. Now we move into kind of long-term management. So one other thing that is kind of very annoying for everyone to do right now is, hey, I have a new term coming up. I'd love to be able to activate said term because if I am sending in time tickets and I have already enabled registration, the only thing that I need to do is make sure that that upcoming term is active for registration. All I have to do is come in, click on that particular term, and then come in here and essentially toggle it on as active, it will show you the term code so that you can make sure and confirm that this is in fact the term that you meant. The other cool thing that you can do is you can come in here and you can create estimated registration windows for these terms. So you can come in and say, great, yes, we expect that this is going to be a shopping cart. Here are the dates. We estimate this number of students, and we can use this information to make sure that we have scaling ready to go for both open enrollment and for time tickets. So that way, your instance for these dates is ready to go, ready to scale, without necessarily having to kind of reach out to your partner success rep to kind of get that in for you. Now you can more or less submit it yourself by kind of adding in this particular window. The other thing that I want to add to this particular section, and this is exactly the kind of like feedback and ideas that we're looking for kind of at the end, is, if you are leveraging time tickets with us and you've estimated a certain number of students for this particular cycle based on kind of like what you know of your student population, being able to actually display the number of time tickets that we have in the database so that you can see if there is a huge discrepancy between kind of like how many you estimated and how many Stellic ultimately ended up like parsing and storing in the database. That way we can identify issues like, oh, why are there like 800 students that don't have a time ticket when we expected them to, well before the registration cycle even begins? So that's kind of how you might leverage these estimated registration windows. Speaking of open enrollment, once I have active semesters, I can now generate open enrollment windows myself without having to reach out to Stellic at all. This is super useful for both partners that leverage open enrollment. And so kind of quick definition of terms here. There are two ways to essentially like activate registration on Stellic. You can send in time tickets via the registration times feed. This is when you want things to be a little bit more granular, where you want like specific students or student groups or like freshmen or sophomores to have specific start times or maybe chunks of times and windows. If you want things to be a little bit more granular, time tickets are your way to go. But if you get to a particular date at which all students really have access at the same time, open enrollment is a great way to essentially say, I don't want to send in any more time tickets than I need to. This is how essentially Stellic creates time tickets on your behalf for kind of all students. And so I can now come in here and create open enrollment windows, which is also super useful for getting registration enabled in your test instances because you don't necessarily want to send in time tickets. I might want to be able to just go in and say, you know what, I actually really want to start a direct registration cycle. Let's do all subterms, all campuses, all enrollment levels. And I want it to start at, more or less yesterday because I want to immediately get access and I'll have it through the end of this month. And this, upon clicking save, I will now, without any deployment needed or anything along those lines, I can go in as a student and actually see registration for this term because I set a kind of like start date in the past. So this is a great way to say, oh man, I really want to start testing registration. I want to test this particular flow in my test instance, but I forgot to ask Stellic to turn on registration for this term. You can now do that yourself immediately and get that set up. So that way you can really unblock yourself. And this also, obviously works in production for setting up future open enrollment windows. And you can kind of, update those and make those much more granular if you only want them to be active for particular subterms or particular campuses or particular enrollment levels. So you have kind of all of the granularity that exists across open enrollment can all be accessed within this particular tool. So this is really kind of what we have available right now for kind of managing your kind of ongoing cycles. I can activate terms and I can set up open enrollment windows for all terms going forward without necessarily needing to reach out to Stellic to get anything kind of set up. Last but not least is my personal favorite feature. This allows you to export registration logs. Now, that doesn't necessarily sound super exciting, But what this gives you is it allows you to select a particular term and you can export everything. This will give you essentially every single registration transaction across every single user for that particular term. This can tell you, I can see exactly how many students are actively participating, have actively participated. I can see all the successes, all the failures. I can see all of the payload and messages that are included in all of those failures. If I am identifying that there is, oh, it looks like there might be a multi-component section that's misconfigured. If I am trying to oh, a student has reached out and they're saying that they can't do X or Y, what's going on? I can put in that student's username, export the logs, and see exactly what they've actually done on Stellic, what requests they've sent, what was in the payload, whether or not it succeeded or failed. And so let's just go ahead and export that, and then we can kind of go through a kind of sample here. So you can see things like, let's zoom in on this guy here. So I can see timestamp, so when it came in. I can see requester and student. So you can see where these are the same versus where these are different. So these are like, okay, great. The student sent these requests in as themselves, but it looks like this actually may have been like an admin or an advisor submitting this request on behalf of this student. You can see semester, year, operation, and then whether or not it succeeded. What was in the payload? Was this a single section? Was this multiple sections? If it was a validation error, you can start to see those. You can see, okay, this class has stopped taking enrollment. You can see, oh, the SIS is unreachable at this time. Oh, it looks like there was a permission number that was included, but it wasn't found on the class permissions table. So maybe the student had a typo, or maybe the student was never actually given a permission, and instead, they tried to, get in, but maybe you can see that they want one, and you can follow up with the student and be like, "Hey, what's the deal? What are you trying to kind of accomplish here?" You can see across all of these different sections all of the information that you can kind of get here. You can see for this particular enrollment that failed, I can come all the way over here and I can see that this particular combined section class is full, so that the enrollment didn't take place. So you can see oh wow, okay, I can get, exactly why certain things succeeded or failed. I know exactly what section ID it is, and any kind of errors and timestamps. So this in our mind is the number one tool that we will be able to leverage to kind of bring all of us together to very quickly troubleshoot any registration issues. It will allow us to follow up on specific requests from students to see, oh, student is saying that they are not able to do X or Y. Can I go in, put in the student's username, and see exactly what Stellic has seen from that particular student to get more information there to help troubleshoot with individual users. And then also just in terms of being able to say, great, I would love to see, how much activity is happening on Stellic right now. Maybe I'm really curious to see, oh, we actually had, an orientation today. I would love to be able to drill in and say just for kind of this particular orientation day, what did the kind of bump in activity look like? And you can then export that and see kind of exactly what you got in terms of number of students, number of enrolled sections, all that kind of stuff. So that is kind of in general the three core pieces that are in the registration hub today. It's meant to kind of, streamline setup, help you kind of manage all of your kind of ongoing enrollment cycles without necessarily needing Stellic to kind of help set you up. And then you have a tool to kind of troubleshoot and track um, essentially all of your registration activity for individual users, time periods, terms. And so that's the kind of initial version that we're going to roll out to the partner success team, as well as to kind of whoever you would like to designate. So you can kind of start playing around with this in your test instance to get a little bit more familiar. With that being said, we are going to turn this on basically next week. So when we're all back from the holiday weekend, You can start playing around with this, and this is the kind of thing where as soon as you are comfortable with how this works, because it is gated behind permissions, it is pretty safe for you all to turn this on. So I think as soon as you have checked it out and you're like, yep, this looks great, would love to be able to have this and check stuff out in, in prod and download registration logs, etc. You can turn this on immediately within prod, even on the 17th if you want. So this is a little bit of a safer rollout here, but we want to make sure that you all have a chance to play around with this, get familiar, make sure we haven't missed any kind of like core pieces. And so please reach out to your PS team to make sure that we know exactly who you want to assign specific permissions to. And obviously, we can add more of those over time if you want to have a smaller core group that wants to kind of test things out. As we kind of transition into kind of like the next phase, Q&A and feedback, I wanted to kind of give you an idea of some of the things that we're thinking about. I've given you some hints of where we're going with the kind of roadmap for the registration hub, with the kind of summary of time tickets to make sure that you all can see, great, I thought I sent this many time tickets. How many did Stellic actually get in the database? This gives you direct access to see how many students you actually have time tickets for, and whether or not that matches your kind of expected number to identify potentially discrepancies there. I want to kind of have a whole section related to like 500 errors. These are issues where there is a maybe like a timeout in terms of requests that are going to the SIS, or the SIS is unreachable for various reasons, and we can surface APIs, like what API endpoint we were trying to hit, what was in the payload, how long did it run for, did it time out, and then also allow you to potentially designate specific on-call people, so that we can then immediately ping people in response to getting these errors, so that rather than, Stellic detecting this and triaging this and then reaching out to your team, we can essentially kind of parallel triage these particular types of errors. In general, I want to kind of clean up and merge kind of the registration admin panel settings so that there's like one place where you can go to kind of update everything related to registration. And then beyond just being able to download registration logs, which is super useful for, troubleshooting various use cases, but, makes you do a little bit of work to figure out like, great, I would love to really just see how many students have enrolled in classes or how many sections have been added and dropped. You want to get the like high level, more real-time metrics. We want to kind of surface those numbers as well so that you can kind of see, great, what does it look like as time goes on? What percentage of overall students did we want to be registered at this point, and what are we seeing in real time? So those are some ideas of things that we already kind of have on our roadmap for enhancements that we want to make to the registration hub. But this is a tool that really is for you all. And so if there are other ideas that you have, other things that you've always been dying to be able to get access to related to registration setup, configuration, management, insights into various stats or other things along those same lines, this kind of registration hub gives us kind of like that foundation that we haven't had before to kind of add these new tools. And because of the new permissions, it also gives you those tools directly in your fingertips. So with that, we can now kind of turn it over to Q&A.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Gordon. There was a lot of positive reactions there. So thank you for those who were sharing your heart and applause emojis. That was good to see. And also thank you for those that submitted some positive feedback in the Q&A too there. Looking through some of the questions that we have here, first one that I see looks like there's an institution out there that's highly interested in APIs to export kind of the registration activity that you were just showing a little bit ago, specifically around key performance indicators or even adoption metrics within the context of registration. Is there an API for this kind of information on the roadmap at all?
Not necessarily on the roadmap right now, but I do love that idea. I mean, I think the idea is that we will have a lot of this data. And so, in addition to it, obviously it'll be easier and faster for us to enable like more manual exports for the time being. But I think an API layer that allows you to kind of access this is totally reasonable. So yeah, I love that idea. And in general, if people have like specific data elements that they would love to be able to access via API, and if you have also things like particular use cases or cadence at which you want to get this data, all of that is really good for us to know.
Awesome. Okay, the next question that I see here, great question from Sarah. How long are those registration logs maintained for?
Oh, that's a great question.
Yeah,
I would need to ask my team. I will take a note of that and follow up with you.
perfect. Okay. Let's see. Next question that I see here. So I think as you were going through some of the enrollment window and other time and date based configuration settings, it looked like for you those were in Pacific time. Is that the universal setting that folks will have to kind of translate that from their time zone to Pacific, or will that be reflective of their local time zone?
It should be reflected in their local time zone. That was just me being a Pacific time user. So you're seeing Pacific time. But yes, Registration Hub, like I think many parts of Stellic, should respect your local time zone.
Awesome. Thanks for confirming that, Gordon. Let's see. Next up, is there a limit for the estimated registration windows that can be added in the registration hub here?
There is not currently a limit. I am curious around the number that people would want to create there. I think that in general, like those are tied to particular terms. So as you are, toggling between different terms, you can add more windows. But I am curious around the use cases that you all are seeing for which you would want to create, tons and tons of windows. Just because that I think may change, how we design that particular feature. I think we were definitely thinking that, people would build those, but that there would likely be fewer windows that people would be creating. If people are planning on creating a bunch, I think that's a very different user experience that I would likely put together. So definitely curious about people's feedback there.
Yeah. It looks like we do have a kind of follow-up question to the time zone one.
Yeah.
For users that are across different campuses that are in different time zones, how would that look for those folks?
Interesting. Oh, meaning I'm in one location, I am setting up an enrollment window for a different campus that's in a different time zone. That's the kind of like use case that we're talking through here.
Yeah, I believe so. Either that or just folks who are working in generally different time zones at the same time. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it will likely be centered on your local time zone. So I think there might be need to be a little bit of translation there, but I think that we could also look at, do we have time zone data for various campuses and or locations? And if you select a specific campus, could we in fact just leverage that campus's time zone? So I'll need to look in to see if we actually have that data at the campus level.
Okay. Awesome. Let's see. A little bit less of a question, more of, I think, just a feedback, piece of feedback,
Yeah,
Gordon. It looks like in addition to tracking add and drop in the registration log, looks like there's also a desire to include swaps as well. So just a note
totally.
for that
Yeah,
question that
I
you
think
had.
I think we'll track enroll, we'll track waitlist, we'll track swap, we'll track drop, and then I think we will also be able to track pending drop if enroll requests as well. So yeah, we'll surface all of like the core kind of enrollment metrics as part of that real time. And real time will be is a air quote real time. It'll be pretty close, but yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Okay. There's a couple of different questions that I think we'll address with this one because they're all kind of asking the same thing. Permissions for this new registration hub. How do folks go about getting the actual permission access for this? Is that something that their PSMs are going to work with them to set up? Is that something they'll have enabled automatically? What does that look like?
Yeah, so I think that the kind of recommendation for the time being is to work with your PSMs to essentially set up which users you want to have access and what access level, and your PSMs will be able to assign those out.
Yeah. In that same vein, there's also a question around whether or not those permissions are going to be feed-based or set in the UI. I believe that's somewhat going to vary based on your larger permission setup, but Gordon, is that something you're able to speak to as well?
I think we eventually may kind of like roll this into kind of the standard permission setup. So then it will kind of behave more or less like the other permissions. I think that for this like early access period, and for like the initial rollout, we're going to manually assign these out.
Perfect. Okay. Awesome. It looks like there's a question. We typically have around 35 to 40 registration appointments for each semester. We are still early on in our registration implementation, so this person is not 100% sure how they might want to use this. It would be interesting, however, to have the option to add all windows for their testing purpose. So I think just more feedback than an exact question there.
Yeah, I think if you have, 30 to 40 registration appointments, I think that that feels like it's a much better use case for time tickets and like in general the registration times feed. I think that open enrollment really is meant to work for institutions that have like a particular time period in which all students get access and kind of maintain access for the exact same time period. And it's also a very useful tool for getting registration enabled quickly in your test instance when you may not necessarily want to be blocked by, oh, let me find a user that has an appointment right now. I mean, obviously, if you want to test registration time tickets, that is one thing. But if you're just trying to kind of like test other core flows, enabling open enrollment in your test instance is a really nice kind of like quick hack to give yourself and other users immediate access to begin testing kind of core registration flows. So I think that those are like the two core use cases for open enrollment is if your institution actually has kind of like standard open enrollment windows, then it becomes very useful to use in production. Otherwise, think of it as a kind of handy little testing tool.
Perfect. Awesome. All right. It looks like we're getting down to the last couple of questions here. We do have a question out there. Would it be possible to add a new student into Stellic to then be able to register the same day?
Yes. So those that would be through kind of like our partner APIs. So you can 100% create a, new time ticket for a student that has come into the system. And as soon as you like essentially create that enrollment appointment for that student in your SIS, it will automatically essentially like you'll have a listener there. It will then push that time ticket and students will then immediately get access. If you are in an open enrollment period, that user will automatically get registration access as they log in. But yes, in terms of a new student coming into the system and getting into Stellic, partner APIs are going to be your friend. And if you have more questions about like what partner API options are there, definitely make note to bring that up to your PSM. We have kind of a whole um, handy dandy doc um, that kind of outlines all of the options there.
Perfect. Alrighty. Another question we have here, we still have the option to import time tickets from our SIS instead of setting them up in the Stellic UI, correct? Which I believe the
Yeah,
answer
yeah.
to that is
So
yes.
100%. Yeah. So the time tickets will still 100% be done in the SIS and then processed through the feeds. There is like for partners that leverage open enrollment but have kind of a more complex setup, we are also working on kind of like an importer where you might be able to set up your kind of various open enrollment windows in a kind of like a CSV, and you might be able to upload that, and it would kind of create all of those for you in the tool. Um, but yes, time tickets will still be done through the kind of like through the SIS slash feed. The only thing that will kind of show up at the registration hub eventually is just a, hey, here's the number and kind of like some stats about your time tickets. Once we've actually parsed those and we have them in the database, that's more of a like awesome, you're seeing the numbers that you expect because, with time tickets, once a term is active and the time tickets are in the system, as soon as the start date for those time tickets hits, students will get access to registrations. The only thing that you really need to confirm is the term active, which you can do in the registration hub, and are the time tickets in the database.
Perfect. Thanks, Gordon. Alrighty. Well, it looks like I think we've gotten through all of our questions here. We still do have a little bit of time here. Any other questions from the audience here that we want to make sure that we're able to talk to through related to our registration hub here? And as we're waiting for the last couple of questions that may trickle in, I do have a poll that I'd like to put up here just to see, to get your feedback on your experience with today's webinar. Of course, want to make sure that we're continuing to provide relevant topics in these webinars that we're doing. So would love if you could just spend a little bit of time here giving us some feedback in the poll up there. All right, awesome. Well, it looks like we are through all of the questions that we have here in the Q&A. So as we're kind of wrapping up here, I'll say thank you all for attending today's webinar. Really appreciate those of you that sent reactions in Zoom here or had feedback for us. I know that'll be beneficial for our PS and our product team here. So thank you for sharing that with us. Um, a quick sneak peek to next month's webinar that we're going to be having in March. Our topic for then is going to be our overall new registration experience. So we'll be building off of kind of what we introduced today with the new registration hub, and we'll expand that out to the new overall registration experience that we're building here in Stellic. So be on the lookout for some communications around that webinar with an invitation, and we hope to see you all there next month. Awesome.
Thank you.
Alrighty. Well, thank you all for your time. Gordon, I'm not sure if there's anything else you want to add here in closing. Otherwise, I think we'll go ahead and wrap up here.
I'll add kind of one quick thing. So you won't be getting rid of me that easily because I will see you in this next webinar where we'll be kind of walking through the new registration experience. If you are kind of a current or upcoming registration partner, you have likely already been in talks with your PS team around a lot of the new changes. Um, there should be communications that have either come to you or will be coming to you shortly around new feeds, potential changes to registration packages that will kind of unlock some various new features. And so make sure that if you have not heard from your PS team or if you have outstanding questions around any of those new feeds or those new questions, we will be sharing um, more and more details around kind of like what to expect, as well as hopefully helpful kind of like screenshots and videos and knowledge base articles that you might be able to use to help with your kind of training and communication about the new scheduler and registration features. So please make sure to reach out to your PS team if you have active kind of like questions, and or if you have my email, please feel free to reach out to me as well directly, so that you all can make sure we get those questions answered ASAP, especially related to the new feed, because if we can get that data in earlier when the new registration experience is kind of live for public preview and test. You'll be able to immediately start to test out and play around with the new features that it enables.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Gordon, and thank you all again for joining us for this month's webinar. I'm looking forward to regrouping with you all next month to continue this conversation around all things registration in Stellic. Awesome. Well, thank you all and have a great rest of your day.